The fractional executive business revolution is happening right now for small businesses. And in today's episode of the Bill Hauser Podcast, we're going to talk about why fractional executives for companies doing under $20 million a year in revenue is one of the most critical investments that could possibly be made in your company in the new economy that we are now in. Okay. So first, let's talk about what's a fractional executive, okay? So most businesses do not have formal leadership teams, okay? A leadership team structure in most healthy businesses looks like, a CEO, which is otherwise known as the visionary of the company, which then has a number two in command, which is usually a COO, otherwise known as the integrator, as made famous in the book Traction and EOS. And the integrator's job is to make the visionary's vision come true through operationalization of the visionary's vision, right? And the COO's job, in theory, is to make sure that the business is run like a well-oiled machine. So what does a well-oiled machine business look like? Well, in my viewpoint, a well-oiled machine business means that a company runs on a structured quarterly pulse, okay? And this quarterly pulse results in a quarterly planning method that the business uses to organize, rank order, and put in order of priority all of the company's top objectives, the top objectives for sales, top objectives for marketing and lead generation, the top objectives for operations and client service, right? And during a quarterly planning session, we walk away with what are called quarterly boulders, or quarterly, basically projects and intentions and focuses for the quarter that have measurable outcomes tied to them with deadlines and owners of each quarterly goal. And this quarterly pulse, this quarterly planning process should ultimately be reverse engineered from the annual goals of the company, right? So we set an annual target during an annual planning session, which is technically a form of quarterly meeting, right? It's just a quarterly meeting held at the end of the year and, to project for the next year. And then we have quarterly meetings, which are basically steering the ship on where we're going to take this business for the next 3 months so that we can ladder up and reach our annual targets, right? And most businesses are not following a structured process like this from a quarterly perspective. And because of that, the way they run meetings, which is in essence the lifeblood of most companies, right, is how do you run your recurring meetings so that you can hold people accountable? You can do some creative ad hoc type meetings in the company to do, creative strategy. That's what most meetings are in disorganized companies, are kind of off the cuff, random initiatives, right? But how do we create structured meetings with, the quarterly planning process it starts with, but then it turns into a weekly executive L10 meeting where your executive team gets together, which I haven't mentioned the other titles in the executive team, gets together every single week, and then we report on the status of the quarterly goals that we came up with at the beginning of the quarter, and any of the goals that are off track, these goals we need to then spend time problem solving around, right? And then we also go through the top 10 company KPIs, which are the key performance indicators, the top 10 numbers, right? Every business needs to have a number one number. This is your North Star metric as a company. But then you'd also need like 9 follow-ups to that so that you're able to kind of look at your business like the dashboard of a car to understand, do I need to change the oil? Is this tire low, right? We need just enough information to know what parts of our business to drill into, and the parts that are on track or outpacing what you expected, we don't need to spend that much time on because that's working, right? And we need to spend time on the areas that aren't working and problem solve around those. That's how weekly meetings should happen. But when you enter your weekly executive meeting with what the hell popped up this week, and then we're doing random discussion and random creative problem solving, it creates a environment of disarray and a little bit of confusion in the company as to what the real priorities are. If we're always putting out fires and dealing with whatever our objectives are on such a short-term basis, we lose track of the quarterly plan, which should ultimately ladder up to that annual plan. This is what we call reverse engineering in business, right? And that's really the COO's job, is to make sure that the company is running like a well-oiled machine from a quarterly planning to a weekly executive meeting process. But then there needs to also be one-on-one meetings, right? In my company as CEO, I don't necessarily manage people. Our COO is who manages people. And we actually have two COOs in our company. We have a COO of client services and then a COO of the actual enterprise itself. And their job is to manage their respective teams, right? And the COO of the company is actually, in our business model, who holds the team accountable, checks in on their metrics via one-on-one meetings. One-on-one meetings are not designed to just be whatever the heck popped up this week, right? One-on-one meetings are designed, the most effective ones should be designed around what key projects has this executive agreed to execute this quarter, where are they on track, where are they off track on these key projects, and then looking at the key performance indicators that they own, and then looking at what numbers do they own that are on track, above pace, or below pace and off track, so that we know which things we need to drill into during that one-on-one, so that we can provide direct feedback to that executive on what's working and what's not working and where they need to improve, right? And most visionaries are not able to hold themselves to that structured approach to running a company. Hence why you need that, a COO to do that, right? And most COOs who are titled that aren't actually doing this. They're just putting out random fires and doing all the stuff that the CEO didn't have time to do. They're not really creating a well-oiled machine, right? So we have CEO, we have COO, otherwise known as integrator. That integrator is the person who makes the business into a well-oiled machine and holds the executives accountable. And then you have your executive layer beneath the COO, which is your head of finance and HR. Then you have your head of sales. Then you have your head of marketing. Then you have your head of client service, right? So that is how a executive team looks at. That's how you look at an executive team that's healthy in a healthy growing company. So let's go through some of these roles. What is a client services lead? This would be either a VP of client services, the person in charge of you delivering world-class service to your clients or customers. That's who the VP, EVP of client services is. And that person's in charge of basically making customers happy at scale without the owner, the CEO, or the COO's involvement, really. So that's a pretty simple role. And in our business, that comes down to the KPI that's a measurement of the success of that role is retention rate. How many clients do we start the year with, and how many of those did we retain by the end of the year, both from a revenue basis and from a logo retention basis, and then it also comes down to net promoter score. Our clients ranking us higher and higher on their customer satisfaction surveys, net promoter score surveys. These are ways you can measure the success of that role. So that's usually an in-house role. Then we have the CFO, which is the head of finance. And sometimes they do some elements around HR in smaller companies. The head of finance really has two key objectives. Okay, they are not designed to do, random problem solving around finance. The real job of a CFO is to create a structured financial pro forma forecast projection for the business using a profit and loss statement projection, looking at historical data, taking the variables from historical data, plugging that into a forward-looking forecast so that the business owner can pre-predict at the end of the year exactly how much money that business is going to take in, both from a gross margin and net margin perspective and top-line revenue scaling perspective. So that's the first part of the CFO's job. And the most important part is that strategic planning element, right? And that is, we always say it should be on a rolling 12 basis, meaning rolling 12 months, meaning whenever a month closes out, you need to have your projection built for the next 12 months, right? So let's say we're in October, right? When the month of October closes out, okay, we then need to have November through November, really, November through November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So November through October of the following year fully planned out so that we're always staying 12 months ahead in our forecasting, right? And the forecast should not change once it's set in stone. Okay, so the quality of your CFO and or VP of finance, whatever you title this person, is going to, in part be, part of it is they should help the company become more profitable, which we'll talk about, in a second. But more importantly, their projections better be on point, right? Because you don't want to, you know that your CFO is not doing an ideal job when you're consistently off track on your projections, because that means they're not good at setting accurate projections rooted in factual data. So you should be able to pre-predict your revenues, your profits, and gross margin 12 months in advance. And that's when you really get scientific with scaling, especially a service-based business. And then the second part of the CFO's role is to be doing financial statement analysis. Okay, so when a month closes out, okay, and all of the expenses and revenues are reconciled in your P&L statement, the job of the CFO or VP of finance is to interpret the financial realities of what happened in your business in the last month, right? To then be able to provide a prescription for, hey, this thing was off track. We spent too much here. We spent too little here. We lost a salesperson here, and that reduced the amount of sales that we made, and all the things that made you not hit your goal, right? Ultimately become the solutions for the things you're going to work on for the next 30 days to then get it closer to reaching the goal and to continually improve your ability to do financial forecasting through financial statement analysis, okay? So those are the two real pillars of what a CFO should be doing. Strategic planning, that forward-looking 12-month rolling projection, and then the financial statement analysis. But the input for this, which a lot of people don't talk about, is the proper categorization of your financial statements. And this is oftentimes so different between businesses that it's sickening to me. When I look at companies' profit and loss statements, some people log their marketing expenses as just general payroll expenses if you have an in-house marketing team. Others labeled their marketing team payroll as a marketing expense and tie that into their cost of acquisition. Some companies, don't properly allocate their revenue sources. So then it's impossible to tell the gross profit of the different products or services you sell when you're not categorizing revenues and then categorizing expenses per source of revenue, right? So setting up your P&L and financial statements to be clearly legible is the other job, really, of that VP of finance role and or CFO role, so that you have the right data to then make projections from and then to do problem solving from, right? So we always say that the proper P&L statement should be structured. First, at the top, you have your revenue by source, right? Then you have all of your COGS or cost of sales, COGS or COS. Your COGS or cost of sales is the cost of providing the services related to those revenue breakdowns, which allows you to see gross profit, which is the next layer, right? And then from gross profit, we have our expense category, which includes sales and marketing expenses. And then you should be able to break down sales-specific expenses and then marketing-specific expenses. And then beneath that, you're going to have your operating expenses, otherwise known as OpEx, right? And this is more like your overhead. Some people put their executive salaries in here and don't allocate that per department. That's what we recommend doing if you have a true executive leadership team. And then that ultimately, at the bottom of it all, leaves you with your net profit, which is, your net profit, net operating income and or net profit. And if your books are not, if you don't even know how to categorize your cost of goods sold, what are cost of goods sold expenses versus what are sales and marketing versus what are OpEx expenses, then it's a lot harder to problem solve when your company is not where it should be in profit margin, growth rate, et cetera. So that's the job of the CFO. The job of the next role is the head of sales and or the head of marketing. This is really your client acquisition bucket. And a lot of people misunderstand this, okay? Like the head of sales and marketing, their job is to create clarity for where you're bringing your marketing plan, where you're bringing your marketing strategy for the next 12 months on that rolling 12 basis that we talked about. So it's not just, we got another initiative this week. Oh, we got another thing to launch this week. Oh, we got another. That is not a marketing or sales leader, okay? That is a day-to-day manager, which is very different than a leader. So a true leadership team needs to be filled with leaders, okay, who are setting direction for the cohort of the business that they're in charge of. So for sales and marketing, we notice that there's often not a true leader, in businesses. There's not a true leader in the financial seat, and there's not a true leader in the COO seat. There's a lot of random problem solving happening. Not to mention, in order to hire someone who has tactical execution skills on the leadership elements that I just broke down. So let's say that somebody is excellent, okay, at managing a sales team. There is a low probability that that person will also be very good at leading your sales and marketing strategy, okay? These are two very different things. So why we are going through a fractional executive revolution is because the price point for you to hire someone who's excellent at tactical execution within a department, but also excellent at the leadership pillars that I just broke down of that same department, leaves a gap, right? And this is why most businesses don't grow, is because they're simply not working to a clear, structured growth plan in all of these departments that I just broke down, right? And this introduces a opportunity where, without needing to change your current team, you're able to add fractional help, right? Let's say you already have a COO. Well, adding a fractional COO allows this fractional COO to set up the company's structure and management methodology to be running like a well-oiled machine. So you are running structured meetings, and that they are facilitating these meetings, right? They're delivering a structured quarterly plan for your business. They're running the weekly meetings in the company to make sure that everything stays on track with the quarterly goal. They're running the annual planning process to make sure we know where we're going, right, as an entire company. That is why, fractional COO is such a powerful role for a business, because it allows you to inject that leadership component, right, of them being in charge of truly the operations of the business without you needing to replace who's on your current team, and just have it be a value add to your current company, just by helping them dial in and create structure and order to your reverse engineering plan. The CFO category is the same exact thing, where, okay, if your current head of finance is not really giving you that structured rolling 12-month plan and comparing actuals to forecast every month and doing strategic financial statement analysis, all it takes is a couple hours a month with a fractional CFO, and you as the owner and or your current head of finance can attend these meetings as participants and have someone drive forward the leadership components of the financial strategy of your business, right? And that same thing, can occur with a head of revenue, right? You would call this a fractional chief revenue officer, the person in charge of sales and marketing as a whole, to create that clear sales and marketing scaling strategy for the company. And I think part of the reason that people are increasingly becoming open to fractional executives is because the average business is sick and tired of not growing. I mean, the average business is not either growing in revenues or not growing in clear, predictable profits. And when your company is not growing in clearly and predictably in either of these two areas, your net worth is really on the line, right? It's very hard to predict, how you're going to grow your company's enterprise value, which is ultimately the reflection of the value of your entire company, It's very hard to predict that when you have no predictability in any of these elements that I just broke down. And that's what fractional executives do, is they embed that predictability into your company without you needing to go and hire a full-time additional hire and or replace someone. Now, for most businesses, most businesses have nothing. They don't have a legitimate COO or anyone with that title. They don't have a legitimate, CFO or VP of finance, right, with clear role and responsibilities around the leadership elements of managing finance. So for many businesses, it's really easy for them to just add on a fractional executive because they've got nothing there. But it's also really easy for the companies that are more established and believe they do already have heads of these functions, because it just becomes a value add and introducing more structure to your organization without you needing to replace people. So either way you look at it, we're seeing, unbelievable success with our fractional executive business. It was honestly an unintended experiment where we had a couple clients of ours, ask for, a fractional executive, and we ended up hiring fractional executives, and now it's it's a 100% retention portion of our business, both our fractional CFOs and COOs. And then we started introducing this other concept, which is a fractional chief business officer, right? And a fractional chief business officer, I look at it like this. This is more of a jack of all trades, okay? This is the person that ensures, from a zoomed out perspective, across all the areas that I just broke down, okay? Your operations strategy, your client service strategy, your finance strategy, and your sales and marketing strategy. This is the person, the chief business officer, is kind of like the gateway between you hiring either a COO or a CFO, where they can be more of that jack of all trades fractional executive, creating clarity across all of these elements with a little less time investment across each of the elements of your leadership function, and create that sense of predictability across each of the areas, right? So look at it like this. If your company is doing under, let's say, $1 million a year, okay, you're probably better off with a fractional chief business officer, okay? If your company is doing over $1 million a year, you're probably better off with either a CFO or a COO, or both, depending on what needs your business have, which I want to go into next. Like, let's talk about how to know which one you need, okay? Well, really, it's based on size, chief business officer. Like, if you're a smaller business, you're not going to be able to afford multiple fractional executives. So you need more of a jack of all trades chief business officer, someone who's grown a business before and has that jack of all trades ability to help you across creating some clarity across sales and marketing, clarity across operations, client service, and finance. But the COO and CFO differential is an important one, okay? So the COO, I always say, is team and systems, right? So operations is team and systems. So if you are consistently having problems attracting, managing, retaining, okay, A players on your team, so that would be the team bucket, and or your systems are broken, there's no predictability in your business's systems and processes, which makes the company and the owner of the company not replaceable, right, which harms the valuation of your company, then if that happens, then you are basically unable to remove yourself from the business. This causes a bunch of owner burnout, right? And it's time for a fractional COO to come in and rebuild your management structure of the company so that you're basically delegating your quarters, meaning you're, as the CEO, you're setting your big picture plan as the quarter. The fractional COO is then responsible for transmitting that across all other parts of your company from an operations standpoint. And then once that plan has been transmitted, it's the CEO's job to step away and only step in when there's things that are off track that require very specific guidance around the preset goals, right? So team and systems, efficiency, and team, look at that as your COO bucket, right? And now an element of COO, which is emerging, is the fractional chief AI officer, right? And honestly, if you can find a COO that has a little bit of kind of AI ability, to add to that efficiency component and the systems component, that's going to be one of the most important investments you could ever make, right? So instead of hiring someone for $300,000 a year, you can find a fractional executive, whether it's through us or any other company that you look out for this. You could hire a fractional executive for, call it 1/8 the cost of a full-time hire, or lower in some cases, and you can get just really the same results, if not better, because the person is so focused on that one objective, which is creating efficiency for the company, and there's no day-to-day distractions, right? Their job is to come in and create structure for the company, and it's hard. You're not able to pull them in different directions, right? As well as you are a full-time employee. So they keep you focused on scaling the business. So that's the team and systems component, which if you have problems in those areas, that's going to be a COO solves that. On the finance side, we look at that as profits and cash flow, right? Or lack of predictability around financials. So let's talk about the CFO. How do I know if I need a CFO? Well, you know you need a CFO when you don't have more money in your bank account at the end of each month, okay? Your bank account is not growing every single month. That can either be a cash flow or profit problem. Or when you file your taxes at the end of year, you're like, what the heck? I only profited X, right? Or separately, you're profiting too much and you don't have the money to cover your tax bill, right? So you either have a profit problem or a cash flow problem or a predictability problem around your financials, right? So I always go for the CFO first for established businesses, because the CFO sets the stage for how this company is going to make you money, net worth, enterprise value, and then your investments in operations, teams, systems, et cetera, should fill into your financial plan. So I always say the CFO is one of the most mission critical roles, whether that's fractional or in-house, because it creates that predictability and that plan for everything else to fall into. Think about it like this. When you're increasing, like, let's say some of your spend in marketing, right? A lot of businesses do this shooting from the hip, right? So we just need to get more clients. So let's just increase our budget, right? What a CFO does is says, okay, wait, let's create a financial model for this, okay? What is our company's revenues now? What are our company's revenues in the future, right? What is the gap? So let's say you're doing $1 million now. You want to be doing $5 million in the future. That's a $4 million gap. Then we reverse engineer from how many clients do we need to sign up to grow our business by $4 million, right? So if your average transaction value, amount of revenue your company takes in per client or per whoever your end user is, right? If your average transaction value is, let's call it $20,000 that you make for each one, let's see what that looks like. $20,000, $4 million gap divided by $20,000. That means you need 200 additional clients to bridge the gap of going from 1 million to 5 million. Okay, we need 200 additional clients. Great. How many leads do we need to get 200 additional clients? Okay, well, let's say we need 1,000 leads to get 200 clients. And that means we're going to close 20% of the leads we get into clients, right? Then it's, okay, what is the cost per lead that we're willing to spend, right? Okay, well, let's say we're willing to pay, $200 a lead, all right? And if we need 100 leads a month, $200 a lead times, we need an extra 1,000 leads a month. Oh, actually, that would be, let's just say we need an extra 100 leads a month. $200 a lead times 100 leads a month. That means, okay, if we are spending $200 a lead and we get 100 leads in a month, 200 times 100 means your budget should be $20,000 per month, right, on advertising. Obviously, you need a little bit of baseline to know whether or not you're setting a reasonable cost per lead target, because let's say your cost per lead is actually $400. Well, that means your marketing spend just went from $20,000 to $40,000 a month. But would you be willing to spend $40,000 a month, okay, if that grew your business by $400,000 a month. Duh, right? That would be stupid that you didn't do that. So part of the reason that business owners have a problem with scaling their marketing plan roots back to finance and lack of a financial scaling strategy, right? Same thing with scaling your sales team. Who's going to follow up with those leads, right? How many, let's say you get 100 leads a day. How many leads can one salesperson follow up with in a day, right? Let's say you get 100, Facebook leads that come in, in a day. Can one full-time BDR or SDR appointment setter, can that person handle, 50 of those 100 leads? Okay, we got to start somewhere. Okay, and so if it's 50, then you'd need 2 full-time SDR BDRs to handle those 100 additional leads, right? So you'd have to add 2 appointment setters to your team, right? What's the salaries of those appointment setters? Okay, so let's say it's I'm just going to pull a number out of my butt, 10 grand a month salary. You would never spend that much, but let's just say 10 grand a month salary times 2, that's $20,000 a month in additional sales expense on top of the $20K a month in ads. So you're actually making a $40,000 a month investment to make $480,000 back, right? $400,000 a month back, let's say. So my point is, the lack of having a financial strategy in place creates lack of courage around investing in your sales and marketing, which causes the business to flatline, causes the business to tiptoe into their marketing initiatives, and then they never really see success. And they say, I tried marketing before and it didn't work, but it really stemmed back to the fact you didn't have a clear financial plan, okay? So that's why I think all roads lead to finance, really, as a critical executive for your team. Let's say we sign up all those clients, okay? Well, who's going to handle those clients? You're going to have to hire additional staff. You're going to have job ads for that. Maybe you're going to have to hire a recruiter for that, right? To be able to handle all the additional interviews to add those additional staff to your business, right? So if that's the case, what's the salary of the recruiter? What's the salary of all the employees you'd need to hire to handle those clients, right? Boom, that's another expense. That's a cost of goods sold expense, right? So that's the cost of doing business, the cost of those revenues, otherwise known as cost of sales. But nonetheless, it's still a cost, right? Now, we use the 20-40-10 rule, which says you invest 20% of your growth goal on marketing, 40% of your growth goal on payroll, and then 10% on personal development so that you can deserve to scale into where you're going, okay? We write about this in our book. So what I think most people miss is, how they're going to allocate that 20%. Where am I going to spend that 20% of my growth goal on sales and marketing? What platforms am I going to charge? Am I going to use, et cetera, et cetera? And then how am I going to allocate that 40% salary expense on top line revenues, especially into growing into where I'm going, right? Meaning if I'm going to grow $4 million, if I'm going to grow my business by $4 million, grow my business by $4 million, and I'm going to spend 40% of that on payroll, that means I'm going to be increasing my payroll by $1.6 million that year, okay? Which is fine. But the question is, how many roles is that? Well, if your average comp per employee is $150,000 a year, that means you're going to hire 10.6 employees that year. And then the question becomes, which of those 10 employees I'm going to hire, how many of them are going to be in sales, how many of them are going to be in client service, et cetera, okay? So this is how you do the reverse engineering. 20% of your growth goal is going to be spent in marketing. Let's say you grow by 4 million times 0.2. You're going to spend 4 million times 0.2. You're going to spend about $800,000 a year on sales and marketing, at least. Okay, divided by 12 means you're going to spend around $66,600 per month on sales and marketing all in. Okay. At minimum, okay, we spend close to 30% on sales and marketing as a company. So I'm just saying 20% is a minimum if you want to scale your company. So my point is, we're going through, I know we're experiencing this in our business. We have so much demand for our fractional executive services, and clients are getting such good results from it because we're creating that clarity that then you can confidently invest in your business once you have that clarity around your sales and marketing plan, your hiring plan, and exactly how much the business is going to profit at the end of the next year. And I think fractional executives are the best way to ensure that your company is always staying ahead of the curve, being proactive, so that the owner can know exactly where it's going and so that the owner can get the hell out of the way. That's what the COO does. The COO gets the owner out of the business so the business can run itself on a clear, disciplined operating system. And most businesses, unfortunately, the owner is burning at both ends because they don't have a clear operating system in place. So if you can solve this, you are going to be one happy camper. So if you if you really start critically thinking about how can I use fractional executives to my advantage, whether it's with us or with one of my companies, or whether it's with, someone else, I just want to promote how important this industry is because I see the transformations happen every single day with our clients in terms of the predictability and clarity it brings to your company. So if you don't have a fractional executive, what the hell do you have to lose? Just hire one. It's going to give you so much clarity and help you catapult to the next level in your company. All right. I will see you in the next episode of the Bill Hauser Podcast. Stay great.